Hi guys, welcome to the Ben and Polly channel. Today's video is about Ryan Sinclair, why he's become one of my favourite companions, and I believe he should leave in this year's festive special. I've seen some people say that he's boring or not a very complex character, so this is just my opinion and my interpretation and talking about what I love about him. So Ryan is the reason that I got tested for dyspraxia after watching series 11 and identifying with his disability as well as other parts of his character. For instance, his emotionally closed off attitude, naivety, social awkwardness, but also his sense of humour, loyalty once it's earned, and frustration with feeling abandoned and isolated. Yeah, a bit sad, but there are good things too. Like the fact that he finds comfort in music and video games. It seems to me he's a big pop culture fan, just like Bill Potts was, so I enjoy that about his character. So in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, his relationship with Graham is strained and he's frustrated with his life not working out as he wanted it to. He doesn't want to keep trying to ride his bike because he's convinced that it's not possible, that he doesn't deserve for positive changes to happen to him, which you find out later is largely because of his lack of self-esteem. And there are two reasons for this that I can think of. The first one is the lack of understanding of his dyspraxia, the fact that Graham clearly doesn't understand Ryan's disability. For instance, the scene in the warehouse in this episode where he says, "Started an alien invasion? Gonna blame that on the dyspraxia too," or something to that effect. It's a very, seems like it's just come from nowhere, but it's obviously this built up tension between them and can be very, very confusing to the average viewer why you would connect Ryan's dyspraxia to this. Like it doesn't make much sense, but I think that was meant to demonstrate that Graham doesn't have much knowledge of the condition, and more to the point, the fact that it seems like they don't have a close relationship at all. They don't discuss things like that. Ryan obviously doesn't like to talk about his feelings anyway. The fact that Graham said that comment, and he might have said other things in the past like that, really it's no wonder that Ryan is so defensive as a character in the beginning, and he's scared that his condition can't be understood and it could be a burden to Graham and Grace. The other reason for his lack of confidence is obviously the absence of his father and the death of his mother when he was just 14 years old. He reveals this to Yaz without really thinking about it clearly in the Sinagua Conundrum because of the Yos pregnancy situation, which obviously reminds him of his father not being able to raise him. And when he tells Yaz, he regrets it straight away and thinks, oh no, why have I let myself become vulnerable with a complete stranger who, you know, I've only just started to get to know again and I haven't seen her since primary school. I could see the regret on his face and thinking, oh no, what have I done? But slowly throughout the next two series, his character is really able to open up to the point that in Orphan 55, I know it's not everyone's favourite episode, but it is good for Ryan content, and he's finally able to talk to a stranger, that girl Bella, and tries to even chat her up really badly, but you know, he gives it a go without knowing anything about her. It's awkward and he tries to be funny. He uses humour as a defence mechanism like Chandler from Friends, and that's definitely very relatable for me. And it also reminds me of those great scenes with King James in The Witchfinders where he uses humour to keep King James in the room and goes, aren't there more body parts you could show us, or something to that effect. And the fact that he has to deal with King James fancying him and the whole thing of sort of comparing all the bad things that happen to him, and he's just like, Yeah, that's worse, when King James says about how the people betrayed him and all horrible things. It's just hilarious. I love them as a duo in the Witchfinders. They're brilliant. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, one of the elements which is common with dyspraxia is fumbling with words, and Ryan does this quite a lot. Not saying what you mean and mishearing information. Ryan has a tendency to repeat information the doctor has literally just said, or make a list, or keep repeating, or talking to himself, like in Rosa when he's trying to get the white passengers on the bus, and he's sort of muttering to himself, white passengers down, and he's, you know, thinking clearly of what to do in his head, which, you know, is obvious, but I think it's reassurance more than anything that, you know, he can do this, because he hasn't got the usual person, like he hasn't got his gran, and he hasn't got any of the companions who aren't even his friends yet to reassure him and let him know that he can do it. So yeah, he's not used to having so much pressure on him, I think, because he knows that he can't get frustrated. He can't get frustrated because that didn't work at the beginning of the episode, when he tried so hard to keep in his anger, and he managed to do it, thankfully. But he says to Yaz later on, you know, basically he was so close to punching that guy after he was just trying to be nice and pick up that woman's glove or whatever it was. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting part of his character, that he's trying to keep in those violent tendencies. Yeah, so he literally has to cheer himself on and encourage himself in that way by sort of mumbling and trying to remember things in his head. And I get that might come across as annoying or bad acting, because he tends to mumble or speak very fast, and sort of, because I think it's meant to be more that he's thinking about it under his breath, but because it's, you know, television, you've got to hear what he's saying. But if he said it at kind of a normal volume and kind of like this, it wouldn't be in character. So I do think that was intentional on, you know, either Tosin Cole's part or the direction or whatever, because Tosin Cole acts very different and speaks very differently in interviews. So it is definitely that he is changing his voice, presumably on purpose, either because he thinks, oh, Ryan would just speak like this, or that it's actually part of his dyspraxia, and, you know, that's part of the research that they've done, which, if that is brilliant, because yeah, I can definitely see that. Now I'm going to talk about how I think his dyspraxia has been handled in itself. Obviously, how the condition affects people can be totally different, similar to Bill representing a queer character. Obviously, not all queer people are the same, and some people at the time either liked when she mentioned she was into girls, or they kind of insisted that she was saying it too much and it wasn't realistic. I think there was a danger of doing that with Ryan and the rest of the current companions, really. The kind of approach of, hey, they're dyspraxic, remember? And then people just kind of go, I get it, shut up. And the same with Yaz being a police officer and Graham having cancer, really. We don't need to be reminded every 2 seconds. And I think that Chibbers has actually gone the other way around with this, and some people have complained that those things aren't being mentioned enough, particularly Yaz being a police officer. People were very adamant, particularly after series 11, going, why isn't she using her skills as a police officer? That's a whole other video, but I'll just say she's 19 years old and she's in her 2nd year of probation. She normally just hands out parking tickets. There's only so much she can do. Yes, she's training, but, you know, come on. These companions, they're much more realistic. She isn't suddenly going to be like, hey, put your gun down, hey. I don't think that in particular is a problem. So the little references to Ryan's disability to me seem pretty believable. It's mentioned or hinted at when it is needed to, and not just all the time. For instance, like the scene in the Nikola Tesla episode where Ryan has to jump between train carriages and he needs Yaz to cheer him on to do it. He still needs someone like the Doctor to mentor him. I love their friendship as well. In scenes like Kablam, where they're working together. And another good thing about Orphan 55 is when he suddenly gets his hand caught in the machine thingy and then she tells him to suck his thumb. That's just amazing. Comedy gold. We need more of them together. That's the only thing that I think we've missed out on a little bit, with the TARDIS team being a bit big. And other scenes like her encouraging him when he was climbing the ladder in Ghost Monument, and just that little bit of a mentor relationship that's there with Yaz, and the comedy that is there with Graham, but I think she just needs a little bit more with Ryan. So Ryan brings up his dyspraxia again in Kablam, and he explains to Charlie that his disability makes things interesting and he needs 2 seconds or so to get ready to jump on the conveyor, which I think is a fantastic scene. CGI, not great, but it's really, really fun. And whatever you think of Kablam as an episode, I think that scene is great, and I think the companions in general shine in that episode. They have their dramatic moments and their funny moments, and seeing Ryan in his normal job was really, really interesting to me and really relatable for myself, working in a supermarket and being used to structure and freaking out like I did when I started my job, because I didn't know anything, as everyone does, but it just takes me that little bit longer to learn things and routines, and I hate change. So when Ryan was saying, oh, I had people cover for me in the beginning because I was freaking out, I was like, yeah, same. Oh, bless him. And it just makes me feel proud of him. Oh dear. Okay, yeah, so scenes like that. And then the scene in Resolution where he saves his dad, grabbing him as he's about to fall into space. It's Doctor Who, you've got to give some leeway here. But overall, personally, I think he's a great role model for people with dyspraxia, or people with social anxiety, or who even have just felt like they've been emotionally closed off and can't talk about their feelings. Ryan's journey has definitely shown the progression of that, of somebody who slowly begins to open up and is able to be more himself. To me, he's a very realistic character. It's as if he's in constant state of disbelief, as anyone would really be if they walked into the TARDIS. You'd go, what the hell? And you would ask questions, obviously, but you'd kind of be nervous and stumble over and want to touch things like Ryan does. And he does fall over a few times in episodes as well, and it's just like little touches like that. From what I remember in the Ghost Monument, when he is running away when the spaceship's crashing, and in Praxius when he runs away from the birds to the TARDIS, he almost falls over on his way there. So I don't believe that his disability was forgotten at all from that, but maybe people were expecting a different interpretation. And I'm not saying it's going to please everybody with dyspraxia, because as I've said, everyone's experience is different. But for me, no problem with it at all. I think the realness of these companions maybe clashes a bit with what we're used to, because the tone of the show has changed. But each character still brings a bit of comedy, which I really love, but we just haven't had enough more comedic episodes. But in the Mary Shelley episode, I will say everybody does shine and does have to have their funny moments. Or Ryan's gonna suddenly be in a duel with this guy, and Graham talking to the ghosts, and Yaz, I'm sure she has some funny moments. Well, when they were walking at the beginning, that's pretty hilarious, but yeah, right. Now, obviously, his relationship with Graham is a lot of fun now. They have great banter. I love watching that friendship progress. Some people pointed out that he didn't call Graham Grandad in series 12, but I just can't think of a situation where Ryan had to refer to Graham to another character. But he did call him that or something like that in Resolution, because I remember Aaron, Ryan's dad, being like, what the hell? So Resolution resolved the tension he had with his dad when he finally got to tell him how much he felt like a burden and was able to understand Aaron's perspective from his adventure in the Sinagua Conundrum. Throughout series 12, as I've mentioned, he's still growing in confidence, and his arc was much smaller because it was just about him and not him and Graham as a unit. But basically I'd say it was the character stuff in Orphan 55, which maybe no one remembers because they don't want to watch that episode again because it wasn't great, but he did have some really great scenes and you could see how confident he'd become. And also just learning to be patient with his dyspraxia. You know, just because something isn't talked about or shown on screen all the time doesn't mean that it's not going on in the background. And I know that might sound a bit lazy or bad writing or whatever, but to me, all you did need was that scene with the basketball in Spyfall, and then that scene at the end in the last episode, and little hints throughout that he was gaining confidence, and you know that he'd get there in the end. And he was, from episode 1 of series 12, he was nowhere near as frustrated as he was on that bike in episode 1. And yeah, it might not be that much progression, but it's just to show how far he's come. And this series wasn't really about him, but he had some great moments with Yaz and some great moments with the Doctor, and particularly with Graham as well. So I wouldn't have taken him out of this series at all. It was just worth it for all the moments with Graham. And I just love Ryan and seeing his journey. So that's my opinion in that regard. And also in Can You Hear Me, we obviously saw that he has some doubts about travelling now because he's worried about his friend and what may happen to the Earth in the future or might not. Yeah, and I also love his nice teasing sibling-like relationship with Yaz, so I'm sad if that comes to an end soon. And in It Takes You Away with Hannah, how he suddenly had to protect her and put himself in the shoes of a parental figure, and that's what made him appreciate Graham, and how Graham's been trying to connect with him. I thought that was a really interesting approach to build up to the granddad moment that we all love, which some people thought was out of thin air, but if you rewatch the episode, he's literally suddenly, at the beginning he's thinking, oh, this girl's been abandoned, her dad ran away and left her, and then he literally goes into the shoes of the parental figure and then looks after it. It's brilliant. I really like the episode as it is, but particularly for Ryan, it's great. Honestly, Ryan in the Ghost Monument seems like a completely different person to me, because he tells Graham that he's not a kid and he talks about emotions way too much. And Ryan really matures. Really matures. In Praxis, he goes off on his own with the blogger girl, Gabriella, and he thinks about putting the bird in his back to show the Doctor. He assumes the authority, and he's a leader by then. He knows what he's doing. I think that was brilliant to see. As you probably know, it's been heavily rumoured that the actors that play Ryan and Graham are leaving in the festive special. I'm happy to see them both go at this point, because they've both had great character arcs that have come to a nice end, and it's never great when companions outstay their welcome. I didn't enjoy Rory and Amy hanging around for another season. And in retrospect, although I love some of the season 9 Clara episodes, maybe she should have gone before that. Maybe in Last Christmas would have been a nice one, because I love that episode and the ending. But we shall have to wait and see, but I'm pretty sure at this point that it's going to be Yaz and the Doctor in series 13, and I can't wait for that. I do hope there is more media with Ryan and Graham though, because I've really loved the books so far that have been released for the 13th Doctor and the fam. So Ryan is definitely up there with my favourite companions. Maybe I'll do a companion ranking video soon. Thanks so much for watching, and please comment and subscribe. Tell me what you think of Ryan Sinclair. Bye bye!